The jungle breathes. Beneath the tangled green heart of Indonesia, the air carries something older than the trees themselves, older than the volcanic bones of the mountains. There, beneath layers of soil and silence, rises a shape too deliberate to be nature's accident, a pyramid, vast, eroded, and hidden beneath the hill, known as Gunung Padang. For decades it was dismissed as a mere megalithic terrace, but then came whispers, scientific, hesitant, that beneath its terraces might rest the oldest man-made structure ever discovered. If it were true, it would mean civilization did not begin in Mesopotamia, nor Egypt, nor the Indus Valley. It would mean humanity's memory is fractured, that something immense was forgotten, deliberately, or by time's cruel erosion. The stones seemed to hum faintly at dusk, as if remembering voices long gone. Their alignment points not to modern stars, but to constellations that ruled the sky 28,000 years ago. Who built it? Why was it buried? And what did the builders know that we have lost? Perhaps this hill is not a monument at all, but a message, one waiting for us to remember how to read it. Welcome to ARCHAEON. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. At dawn, the hill of Gunung Padang is shrouded in a gray mist that moves like breath over ancient stone. The first light catches on moss-slick terraces, angular and too precise to be natural. Local villagers have always spoken of this place with reverence. Some call it a sacred mountain, others a sleeping giant. For centuries, no one questioned what lay beneath. It was simply there. A quiet hill in the highlands of West Java, crowned with scattered basalt columns like the ribs of an old god protruding from the earth. But every silence hides a pulse, and in the early years of the 21st century, that pulse began to be felt again. It started not with an explorer, but with a geologist, Danny Hillman Natawijaja. Using ground-penetrating radar and seismic tomography, he looked not at the surface, but through it. What he saw challenged everything he had been taught. Beneath the terraces lay chamber after chamber of stone, structured in layers descending deep into the hill. Some of these layers appeared to have been shaped, carved, placed, and when the data was dated, the numbers whispered something no one was ready to hear, around 28,000 years before the present. If that date was even partly true, it meant Gunung Padang was older than Göbekli Tepe, older than the pyramids of Giza, older than every known civilization by tens of millennia. It would force the rewriting of human history. Yet, as always happens when the earth gives up something too vast, too disobedient to the narrative, disbelief followed immediately. The mainstream response was swift: misinterpretation, coincidence, geological anomaly. But the stones remained, unmoved by debate, patient as time itself. The locals say that the hill glows at night, not with light, but with a kind of presence. Sometimes when wind sweeps through the terraces, there's a sound, like a distant hum or a voice trying to form a word too ancient for the living tongue. No recording has ever captured it. It exists between frequencies, like memory, and so the story of Gunung Padang stands suspended, half science, half myth, a scar on the smooth narrative of human progress. But if you stand at the base of the hill, as morning begins to burn away the fog, something stirs in the imagination. The terraces do not feel random. They ascend with rhythm, 5 distinct layers built atop one another, each with different compositions, orientations, and degrees of age. The uppermost stones, visible to the naked eye, are estimated to be 2,000 or 3,000 years old. The deeper strata, as measured by carbon analysis, stretch back tens of millennia. Beneath them lies a core structure, geometric and deliberate, encased by time and volcanic ash. Could humans from the Ice Age have built such a monument? The question feels absurd to modern thought. At that time, our ancestors were believed to be hunters, wanderers, living in caves, drawing on stone with ochre and ash. Yet here, in the humid folds of Indonesia, a pyramid may have been rising when the rest of the world still dreamt of fire and survival. If that is true, then the very story of civilization, the slow climb from primitive to advanced, fractures like a mirror struck by light. It is not the first time such fractures have appeared. In the 1990s, when Klaus Schmidt unearthed Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the world reeled at its 12,000-year-old carvings. It was supposed to be impossible. Agriculture had not yet been invented, cities had not yet formed, yet there stood massive stone circles aligned with celestial precision. Gunung Padang would push that boundary even further, back into a time where myth and geology overlap, when Earth herself was the only historian. What if civilizations have risen before, reaching their peak only to vanish under ice, water, or fire? The idea is not new. Plato spoke of Atlantis not as a metaphor, but as a memory, a remnant of an older world swallowed by the sea. Myths from every continent whisper of a great flood, a deluge that ended an age and began another. The Javanese legends, too, speak of a kingdom that fell beneath the mountains, of a king who tried to build a stairway to the heavens and was buried by his own ambition. Perhaps Gunung Padang is that stairway. Perhaps it was never meant for gods, but for humans who had learned too much too soon. Still, we must tread carefully. Science demands evidence, not echoes. The controversy around Gunung Padang has divided academia. Critics argue that the geological layers are natural, that weathering and lava flow created illusions of design. Supporters counter that the arrangements of the stones, the alignment of chambers, and the human-like order of the terraces are too precise for coincidence. Samples taken from core drills show signs of modification, of bonding materials not found in untouched rock. There are hints of ancient mortar, a mix of clay, iron, and silica, traces of an intelligent hand. The Indonesian government, cautious yet intrigued, funded studies and invited researchers to observe. The findings remain in tension. Some confirm human intervention, others deny it. But beyond the data, there's a deeper question. Why would nature mimic architecture so perfectly? Why in this one hill among thousands does geometry emerge from chaos? Maybe it is not only about construction, but about memory. Stone remembers vibration. Every sound, every movement imprints itself into the crystalline lattice of minerals. If one could listen closely enough, perhaps the pyramid would tell us what it witnessed: the collapse of an age, the drowning of continents, the silence after the flood. The Sunda Shelf, once a vast land connecting Indonesia, Malaysia, and parts of Southeast Asia, lay above sea level before the end of the last ice age. It was a world of rivers, valleys, and plains, now drowned by the rising ocean. Could a forgotten civilization have lived there, building monuments upon its highlands to survive the coming waters? The idea seems fantastical, yet maps of the ancient world confirm the possibility. When the sea rose 12,000 years ago, it swallowed nearly half the landmass of that region. The survivors, scattered and diminished, may have carried fragments of their knowledge elsewhere, echoes that became the myths of Lemuria, Mu, or Atlantis. Gunung Padang could be the last visible bone of that lost body, and still, the stones whisper without yielding their secret. The more technology peers into their depths, the less certain the answers become. The anomalies persist, magnetic signatures inconsistent with natural formations, cavities that echo hollow beneath dense rock, and alignments that correspond with solstices long past. None of it fits neatly into the accepted timeline. That discomfort, perhaps, is what keeps the mystery alive. Some say it is arrogance to believe that humans before us could have built something so monumental. Others say it is arrogance to assume they could not. For knowledge is not a straight line. It is a tide that rises and falls. Every civilization carries the seed of its own forgetting. And so, Gunung Padang waits, half buried, half revealed. Archaeologists debate, geologists measure, governments hesitate. Yet the mountain remains indifferent, holding within it the memory of a world that once was, or perhaps the dream of one that could be again. When the night descends and the stars wheel overhead, their light falls on the same stones that watched ancient constellations drift across the Ice Age sky. Those constellations no longer align with ours. Their paths were lost when Earth's axis shifted. And still, the terraces point toward them, as if calling to something beyond time. Perhaps it is not the pyramid that waits to be discovered, but us. Perhaps it is waiting for the moment when we are ready to remember. Word count, 1472. The rain arrives without warning over the highlands of West Java, sliding in from the sea with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Each drop seems to awaken the earth, each sound, a faint echo from the past. When the villagers speak of Gunung Padang, they do not use the language of archaeology. They speak of it as a living being, as though the hill itself breathes and remembers. In their stories, the stones are not remnants of construction, but guardians bound by ancient vows. And in a way, those stories hold something that science cannot measure: the persistence of memory through myth. It was in 2013 that the first wave of skepticism reached fever pitch. International scientists questioned the dating methods used by Danny Hillman's team, arguing that the samples could have been contaminated, that organic matter from older volcanic layers might have distorted the results. To them, the claim of a 28,000-year-old structure was too much, a challenge not just to archaeology but to the very scaffolding of human history. For if Gunung Padang predated known civilizations, then everything that followed, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Maya, would stand not as beginnings but as echoes. Yet amid the criticism, small details kept resurfacing. A pattern here, an alignment there, fragments that refused to be ignored. The distribution of stones across the terraces was too precise. The orientations of certain rows seemed to follow astronomical directions, not modern but ancient, corresponding to the night sky as it appeared during the Pleistocene epoch. Even the core composition, as revealed by geophysical scans, suggested a deliberate architecture. A hollow beneath the surface, a possible chamber sealed long ago. That chamber, unopened, unseen, became the axis of the mystery. What might it contain? Tools, bones, artifacts that could rewrite everything? Some whispered of metallic resonances detected deep underground, frequencies that could not be explained by geology alone. Others dismissed it as instrumentation error. But the thought remained, haunting the imagination like a forgotten name. In every civilization, the act of building upward is an act of remembering. The pyramid, whether in Egypt, Mesoamerica, or Asia, seems to be a universal shape of reverence, a geometry that imitates both mountain and cosmos. It draws the eye to the heavens, yet roots itself firmly in the earth. Gunung Padang follows that same silent instinct. Its terraces rise not toward the sky, but into memory. Some researchers began to draw parallels between Gunung Padang and other anomalous sites scattered across the world, places that seem to defy conventional dating. In India's Birana, for example, pottery shards and habitation layers suggest a civilization as old as 9,000 years. In the Gulf of Cambay, sonar mapping revealed what appeared to be submerged structures, grids, walls, and pillars beneath 40 meters of water, dated to around 10,000 BCE. In Japan's Yonaguni Monument, divers swim through what some call an underwater city, though others insist it is merely sculpted by the sea. Across continents, similar arguments unfold. Coincidence or continuity? If these sites are threads, could Gunung Padang be the knot that ties them together, the proof of a prehistoric network of builders whose memory dissolved when the seas rose and the ice retreated? It is tempting to see patterns where none exist, yet it is equally dangerous to refuse them when they begin to repeat. The Sunda Shelf itself once formed a vast subcontinent known as Sundaland, stretching from the Malay Peninsula through Borneo, Sumatra, and Java down toward the edge of Australia. When the last glacial maximum ended around 20,000 years ago, melting ice flooded the shelf, creating the islands we see today. Beneath those waters lie entire river systems, ancient floodplains now swallowed by the Java Sea. Genetic studies of Southeast Asian populations suggest deep lineages that could trace back to those drowned lands. The myth of Lemuria or Mu, often dismissed as Victorian fantasy, may have been an unconscious echo of that lost geography. Gunung Padang stands like a survivor of that deluge, a monument perched high enough to escape the drowning. Perhaps it was built precisely for that reason, as a beacon or as a refuge. The texture of the stones tells their own story. Basalt columns cut with uncanny uniformity, stacked with interlocking precision, suggest a technique beyond mere piling. In some places, traces of bonding material, clay and iron compounds, bind the blocks together, forming an early form of concrete. Under microscopic analysis, the crystalline structure shows evidence of heating beyond what would occur in natural weathering. Someone, or something, shaped these rocks with intent, and yet the narrative remains elusive. The human mind craves beginnings and endings, but history offers only fragments. Each discovery at Gunung Padang opens another question. Who were these builders? Where did they learn their craft? What compelled them to construct on such a scale, in such an age? Some researchers have proposed that they were a forgotten civilization wiped out during the Younger Dryas event, an abrupt climatic reversal around 12,800 years ago that caused widespread extinctions and sea level changes. This event, now confirmed by ice core and sediment analysis, coincides with myths of great floods from Sumerian, Hebrew, and Hindu traditions. Could it have been the global catastrophe that ended a prior human age? In Greenland's ice, scientists have found layers of platinum and nanodiamonds suggesting a cosmic impact, perhaps a fragmented comet striking Earth's northern hemisphere. The resulting fires and climate collapse could have erased an advanced culture that thrived along the equatorial regions. If so, Gunung Padang may be a survivor not only of water, but of fire. But every hypothesis encounters its counterweight. Mainstream archaeologists argue that there is no direct evidence of advanced civilization before 10,000 BCE. No metallurgy, no writing, no city planning. They suggest that humans of that era lacked both the numbers and the organization to construct on such a scale. They point to Occam's razor. The simplest explanation, that Gunung Padang is a natural formation modified by later cultures, is the most probable. Yet simplicity is not always truth. Nature can carve, but nature rarely repeats its mistakes with such symmetry. The terraces are aligned too neatly, the elevations too measured. When the hill is scanned, the layers reveal discontinuities, as though one structure had been built over another, repeatedly, through epochs. It is almost as if each generation, discovering the ruins of the last, added their own stones, continuing a sacred dialogue across time. If this were true, then Gunung Padang is not one monument, but many, an archive of civilizations rising and falling like tides. There is something haunting in that thought. Humanity, forever building upon its own forgetting, like waves erasing and rewriting names in sand. The stones may remember what the mind cannot. Perhaps this is why such places draw us, not for their answers, but for the silence between them. Night at Gunung Padang feels different. When the stars appear, they are brighter here than in the cities below. The terraces shimmer faintly under moonlight, and if one listens carefully, there is a vibration, a low frequency that resonates through the basalt. Geologists attribute it to wind and structure, but those who have spent nights here speak of dreams, visions of ancient fires, of ships sailing on flooded plains, of people watching the horizon darken as if the sun itself were being swallowed. It is said that memory is not stored in the mind, but in matter. Every grain of sand, every mineral crystal, holds the trace of what it has witnessed. Perhaps the stones of Gunung Padang hold the memory of that lost dawn of civilization, the murmur of languages unrecorded, the heartbeat of forgotten gods. And somewhere, deep beneath those terraces, beneath the sealed chamber that has never been breached, something waits. Not treasure, not bones, but understanding. The kind that does not fit within history books, the kind that shifts the way we see ourselves. As the rain subsides and mist returns to the mountain's crown, the terraces vanish once more into shadow. Scientists, believers, and skeptics all leave with the same sensation, that the mystery is not just beneath their feet, but within their own certainty. For if this hill is truly older than history, then perhaps history itself is younger than we thought. And the question remains, what if this is not a monument to the past, but a warning from it? Word count, 1,586. By the time the mist lifts from the slopes of Gunung Padang, the valley below already glows with the pale shimmer of morning. From above, the terraces resemble steps carved into the back of a sleeping creature, too rhythmic, too patient to be random. The wind drifts through the high grass, whispering in a language of its own. Some say it sounds like prayer, others think it sounds like warning. Yet both could be true, for this place belongs to neither the living nor the dead. It belongs to memory itself. Decades before the radar scans and the seismic studies, before the whispers of a lost civilization spread through scientific journals and late-night forums, Gunung Padang was simply a sacred hill. Villagers came here to meditate, to lay offerings of rice and flowers, to ask for dreams. They believed the stones carried voices. Old shamans told of an age before ages, when a kingdom stood upon this hill and light rose from its summit like a pillar connecting earth and sky. When the storms came, the light vanished, and so did the kingdom. All that remained were stones, half buried in earth, waiting for the world to remember them. It is easy to dismiss such stories as folklore. But folklore has a strange persistence. It clings to something that refuses to die. Archaeology, too, is a kind of storytelling, but one constrained by what can be measured. Between myth and measurement lies a silence that both fear to cross. Yet in that silence, truths often hide. The geological structure of Gunung Padang continues to resist simple classification. Each survey deepens the paradox. The hill's core shows densities inconsistent with a natural formation, as though hollowed or filled with ordered voids. Magnetic surveys reveal anomalies, concentric zones of magnetism suggesting artificial layering. When ground-penetrating radar traces the contours beneath, it draws shapes that look disturbingly deliberate. Rectangles, corridors, and chambers stacked beneath the terraces like the organs of a stone body. And beneath all this, at depths approaching 30 meters, there is that sealed cavity, a chamber that remains unreachable. Engineers debate how to enter without collapsing the surrounding structure, while traditionalists warn against disturbing what they call the sleeping god. The locals do not climb to the top at night. They say that after midnight the stones hum not with the wind, but with the memory of those who built them. Science dismisses such notions, yet it is haunted by them. Every data set collected from this hill seems to exist in defiance of what textbooks allow. Radiocarbon dating from organic material within the soil layers beneath the upper terraces repeatedly yields ages older than the dawn of agriculture. Thermal luminescence tests, measuring the last exposure of the mineral grains to sunlight, tell a similar story, cycles of construction and burial stretching back into deep time. But there is a problem. Human civilization, as currently understood, cannot reach that far. No known culture, no artifact, no record extends into 28,000 years of history. To accept such an age would mean rewriting everything, redrawing the timeline of human progress not as a steady ascent, but as a series of forgotten awakenings. And this, perhaps, is why the idea is resisted so fiercely. Still, questions multiply. Why would a small hill in Indonesia become the focus of such debate? Because Gunung Padang challenges a pattern that humanity clings to, the belief that we are the first, that our dawn was singular. Yet myths around the world whisper otherwise. The Popol Vuh of the Maya speaks of cycles of creation, of worlds made and unmade. The Vishnu Purana of India speaks of yugas, vast ages of rise and fall. The Aboriginal Dreamtime remembers lands that sank beneath the sea, long before modern maps were drawn. Even the Genesis flood may echo the same trauma, the memory of a world resetting itself. If we strip away language and geography, these stories converge on the same event, a cataclysm that ended something grand. Could Gunung Padang be one of the few survivors of that lost epoch? In 2018, a joint Indonesian-American team conducted an extensive geoelectric resistivity study on the site. The data showed layers of high resistivity beneath the hill, consistent with voids or built chambers. The results reignited controversy. Some academics demanded the publication be withdrawn, calling it speculative. Yet, the findings persisted in peer-reviewed form, quietly unsettling the comfortable chronology of human origin. At conferences, discussions turned heated. Could the dating results be explained by geological contamination? Could the supposed chambers be natural cavities formed by lava flow? Those answers seemed plausible, until further scans showed angular geometry, a mathematical precision alien to random geology. It was as though the Earth itself contained an algorithm, written not by chance, but by design. Among those who visit Gunung Padang today are not only archaeologists, but also seismologists, historians, mystics, and physicists. Some arrive with instruments, others arrive with prayer beads. All leave with the same impression that this hill is more than stone. It is a boundary between epochs. Perhaps what frightens the modern mind is not the possibility that an ancient civilization existed, but that it vanished. If they were capable of architecture, of mathematics, of aligning monuments to the stars, what destroyed them? The pattern of disappearance, too, is consistent. Around 12,800 years ago, a sudden freeze, the Younger Dryas, descended upon the planet. Temperatures plummeted, megafauna died, oceans rose. Evidence of widespread burning suggests global disaster. For many, this was the end of the Pleistocene, but it might also have been the end of a civilization we no longer remember. Could Gunung Padang have been one of the last refugees? A lighthouse built before the deluge, meant to endure when all else was drowned. In quiet corners of academia, new ideas begin to form. The notion of civilizational amnesia emerges, a theory suggesting that humanity may have experienced cycles of advancement and collapse long before written history. The evidence lies not in artifacts alone, but in patterns, mythological symmetry, lost cartographic knowledge, astronomical alignment impossible for hunter-gatherers. The Antarctic coastline, accurately drawn on the Piri-Reis map of 1513, suggests access to ancient surveying techniques predating ice coverage. Could such fragments be the echoes of a civilization erased by time? If Gunung Padang is indeed part of that forgotten network, then its rediscovery is not an anomaly, it is a reawakening. Yet the scientific world hesitates, for to embrace such a possibility would dissolve the line between myth and history. It would force us to ask whether progress is linear or circular, whether humanity rises anew from its own ashes each time it forgets itself. Underneath the mountain, beneath the sediment and volcanic debris, lies an untouched stratum, an archive sealed before the Holocene. What might be written there? Not in words, but in structure, in geometry, in resonance. The very shape of the pyramid, if one could see it whole, might encode principles of proportion and energy known long before our science rediscovered them. The stones themselves could be instruments, tuned to the harmonics of the earth. Some researchers studying vibrational frequencies at the site have noted anomalous acoustic behaviors, standing waves, as though the terraces amplify sound. Could this have been intentional? A ritual of sound and vibration designed to interface with the planet's own frequency? If so, the builders of Gunung Padang were not primitive. They were custodians of a forgotten science, one that blended geometry, astronomy, and acoustics into a spiritual architecture. But we must be careful. Between possibility and speculation lies a narrow edge. Still, one truth remains. This hill does not belong to coincidence. As night returns, the terraces cool, exhaling their stored heat like the breath of sleeping giants. Lightning flickers across the horizon, momentarily revealing the mountain's full shape. A shadow against the stars, jagged yet deliberate. In that brief light, one sees not just a hill, but the memory of a mountain that once ruled the world's horizon. Somewhere beneath those layers of stone, beneath millennia of silence, a door waits. It is not made of wood or metal. It is made of time. And one day, when we are ready to ask the right question, it may open, not to reveal who they were, but who we are. For every discovery is also a remembrance, and every remembrance is a mirror. The stones of Gunung Padang have waited long enough. Word count 11491. When twilight folds itself across the mountains of West Java, the outlines of Gunung Padang dissolve into the mist, leaving only suggestion, the sense of something vast breathing beneath the skin of the earth. The hill no longer feels like a ruin. It feels like a pulse, slow and ancient, hidden under layers of soil and skepticism. The scientists who come here carry devices that hum softly, their signals descending into stone like questions sinking into silence. Yet what returns from below is never simple. Every reading, every scan, every measurement seems to carry its own riddle. There are those who say the data does not lie. The ground-penetrating radar images show voids, corridors, walls at perfect angles. The electrical resistivity surveys trace anomalies that could only exist in shaped material. The radiocarbon samples drawn from the deep within the structure whisper numbers that stretch beyond belief: 24,000, 27,000, 28,000 years. But belief is stubborn. Archaeologists trained in the rhythm of accepted history resist those numbers, calling them misreadings, coincidences, statistical noise. For if they are true, then the very spine of human civilization bends backward into darkness, and everything we thought we knew, our origins, our progress, our uniqueness, becomes uncertain. Perhaps that is why the stones remain patient. They do not need to prove themselves. They have outlived every theory. The night deepens. The air grows heavy with the scent of wet basalt and jungle. In the faint glow of the moon, the terraces gleam like scales. One can almost imagine them as part of a sleeping dragon, a creature that once rose from the earth, breathing fire into the age before memory. The villagers tell stories of a gate beneath the hill, a doorway that leads into another world. In their telling, those who enter never return as they were. It is said that knowledge itself dwells there, not as words or artifacts, but as presence, a consciousness older than humanity, waiting in the stone. There is something poetic, even tragic, about that idea, that wisdom survives not in the minds of the living, but in the silence of mountains. Yet even within academic circles, a slow shift begins to take shape. A few voices, quiet but steady, argue that dismissing anomalies simply because they do not fit our expectations is unscientific. They remind their peers that every great discovery once began as heresy. When the first images of Göbekli Tepe emerged, scholars too declared them impossible. Yet there they stood, 10,000 years before the pyramids, carved with celestial maps. Perhaps Gunung Padang is another such wound in the timeline, another reminder that knowledge is not linear. Geologically, Indonesia sits upon a volatile crossroad. The collision of tectonic plates births volcanoes, earthquakes, and shifting lands. To build here, in this trembling soil, would require understanding both danger and rhythm. Could the ancient builders have possessed such awareness? Could they have understood how to balance the weight of stone against the restless breath of the earth itself? The terraces, after all, have withstood thousands of quakes. Their design seems to distribute force rather than resist it, absorbing vibration like a living structure. Such resilience hints at intention, a science of stability encoded in architecture long before modern engineering found its vocabulary. If the builders knew how to tame the mountain, what else might they have known? At the edge of the site lies a carved basalt pillar, overlooked by most visitors. Its surface bears faint grooves, worn but deliberate, curving in a spiral that seems to mimic the motion of galaxies. Spiral motifs appear across ancient sites worldwide, from Malta to Peru, from Newgrange to the Nazca Plains. They are often interpreted as symbols of the sun or the eternal cycle. But perhaps they are more than art. Perhaps they are memory maps, representations of celestial motion encoded into stone. If Gunung Padang's terraces were aligned not merely to the stars, but to cycles of precession, shifts in Earth's axis occurring over thousands of years, it would suggest an astronomical knowledge incompatible with the hunter-gatherer age. Some models propose that the site's primary axis once pointed toward the constellation Orion as it appeared around 26,000 BCE. If so, then the pyramid's alignment is not a coincidence, but a calibration, an echo of an older sky. And this leads to a more unsettling thought. What if these alignments were not intended for observation, but communication? What if the builders sought to preserve a message that could only be read by those who understood the rhythm of the heavens? The stones, after all, are not arranged randomly. They hum at specific frequencies when struck. The sound resonates through the terraces, creating harmonics that mirror the vibration of Earth's Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of the planet. Could this have been deliberate? Could the pyramid have been tuned like an instrument, built to harmonize with the Earth itself? Modern scientists studying archaeoacoustics, the study of sound within ancient structures, have found similar effects in megalithic chambers across the world. The hypogeum of Malta resonates at precisely 111 Hz, a frequency known to induce altered states of consciousness in humans. The Great Pyramid's King's Chamber vibrates at comparable frequencies. If Gunung Padang shares this property, then it too may have served as a place not merely of ritual, but of resonance, where sound, vibration, and geometry merged into a form of communion. Such ideas are difficult to prove. They drift between physics and metaphysics, between science and myth. Yet, standing among those stones, one senses that the boundary between those realms was once thinner than it is now. The story of Gunung Padang also carries another echo, one of catastrophe. Around the world, ice cores and sediment layers record a sudden spike in black carbon around 12,800 years ago, a signature of global fires. In the same period, sea levels began to rise sharply. Comet fragments may have struck the northern hemisphere, triggering the Younger Dryas cold event. For generations, this cataclysm has lingered in myth. The flood of Noah, the sinking of Atlantis, the destruction of Kumari Kandam, the loss of Lemuria. Different names, same memory. Could the builders of Gunung Padang have witnessed that event? Could this hill have been their last attempt to preserve what remained of their world? If so, it is both monument and message, an ark built of stone, carrying not bodies, but knowledge across epochs. But knowledge has a strange fate. It survives only when the world is ready to understand it. What if, for tens of millennia, Gunung Padang has waited for that readiness, for us to return? Still, there are those who reject all of this. They argue that every anomaly can be explained without invoking lost civilizations, that radiocarbon dating of organic material proves only the age of the soil, not the stones, that voids in the radar scans may be lava tubes, that the site's shape could result from natural columnar jointing, a geological process creating hexagonal patterns in basalt. To them, the hill's mystery is not ancient technology, but human imagination. And yet, even imagination has power. The need to find meaning in stone is older than language itself. Perhaps this search, too, is part of the story, that in gazing at Gunung Padang, humanity is not discovering the past, but remembering its own reflection. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the air still clings to the coolness of night, the hill seems to exhale mist like breath. Crickets fall silent. For a brief moment, everything holds still. It is as though time itself pauses to listen. Beneath that stillness lies something immense, unmeasured, not a secret, but a memory waiting to become language again. One can imagine, far below, within the sealed chamber, a hollow sound echoing faintly, like a heartbeat through stone. Perhaps it is not the echo of the past we are hearing, but the murmur of our own future reflected backward. For in the end, every mystery is a mirror, and every civilization leaves behind not only ruins but reminders that time is not a straight road, but a circle drawn in dust and rain. Gunung Padang remains untouched, still guarding its silence, still defying our certainty. And maybe that is its greatest lesson, that some truths are not meant to be solved, only remembered when the world grows quiet enough to hear them again. Word count, 1,476. The road to Gunung Padang winds like a vein through the misty heart of the mountains, its edges carved by rain and time. At dawn, the air feels electric, as though charged by something unseen. The sound of roosters echoes from the valley, yet above them, if one listens closely, there is another rhythm, low and distant, like the thrum of a pulse buried in the earth. Some visitors dismiss it as wind. Others, standing alone among the terraces, swear they feel it vibrating through their bones. For years, the debate has oscillated between faith and fact. Official archaeology classifies Gunung Padang as a megalithic site used by local cultures 2 or 3 millennia ago, a place of ritual and reverence built atop a natural hill. But those who have looked deeper, literally, believe something older sleeps beneath, encased in volcanic stone and time. What makes the site so confounding is not only its scale, but its sequence. Layer upon layer of structure, each distinct in age and material, rise like geological memories, one civilization building upon another, the new never quite erasing the old. The uppermost terraces, the ones visible today, belong to a culture remembered in folklore but unnamed in the archaeological record. Beneath those lie stones so weathered they seem to predate the memory of man itself. In 2022, another seismic survey was conducted under stricter scientific control, and again, the results spoke of anomalies. Rectangular voids, consistent with chambers, reaching depths of more than 30 meters. The deeper the signal went, the more deliberate the shapes became. Yet still, the core chamber remained sealed. Some suggested drilling, others restraint. The decision to dig is never just scientific, it is spiritual. In the eyes of the villagers, the mountain is alive, and to wound it might awaken something that should remain asleep. The paradox is ancient. Humanity yearns to uncover truth, but fears what it might find. Beyond the technical reports and heated debates, there lingers a quiet pattern, one that connects Gunung Padang to distant corners of the world. Across the Pacific, in the Andes, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman bears walls of megalithic blocks carved with interlocking precision, as though poured rather than chiseled. In Egypt, the granite of Aswan was cut with smooth curvature, traces of unknown tools evident in stone thousands of years old. In Turkey's Derinkuyu, entire underground cities were carved out of volcanic tuff, deep enough to shelter tens of thousands. These sites share no direct lineage, yet they hum with a shared intuition. That stone was once a language, and the earth itself a script. Could it be that these cultures, separated by continents and millennia, were inheritors of the same lost memory? That the builders of Gunung Padang were not the first, but the last to remember how to shape matter to resonate with meaning? Among the data gathered from the site, one finding stands out: traces of ancient cement binding certain layers together. Not modern concrete, but a mixture of clay, iron, and silica, chemically altered by heat, fused in ways natural erosion could not replicate. Laboratory tests confirmed the composition was artificial. It was not volcanic residue. It was engineering. If that is true, then whoever constructed Gunung Padang possessed not only knowledge of quarrying and geometry, but of material science, a mastery lost for tens of thousands of years. To admit this possibility is to confront the unthinkable, that civilization, as we define it, may have existed long before history began to count. And perhaps, in some silent corner of deep time, it ended. Throughout ancient myth, the image of a mountain recurs as both birthplace and tomb of knowledge. In Mesopotamia, gods descended upon ziggurats to commune with mortals. In Hindu cosmology, Mount Meru anchors the universe, its peak brushing heaven, its base sinking into the underworld. In the Americas, pyramids mirrored the sacred mountains of the gods. Everywhere the geometry repeats, earth reaching upward, spirit descending downward. The mountain becomes the mediator between realms. Gunung Padang fits this archetype perfectly, a pyramid disguised as a hill, a temple buried by the very ground it once sought to ascend. Perhaps it was not buried by accident. Volcanic eruptions are common in Java, and ancient builders would have understood the mountain's instability. Yet to cover a monument so completely suggests intention. What if the pyramid was entombed deliberately, to preserve it from the rising seas or from destruction that swept the rest of its world away? Some legends of West Java speak of a king of fire, a ruler who defied the sky and was punished when the mountain consumed his city. To later generations, it became myth. To geologists, it might hint at a real cataclysm, a massive eruption or impact event that forced survivors to seal their most sacred knowledge beneath the earth. And so the pyramid became both tomb and seed, awaiting rediscovery. In recent years, a new discipline, geomythology, has begun to bridge the divide between story and science. It examines how myths preserve memories of natural disasters, encoded in metaphor. Floods, fires, and divine retribution often correspond to real geological events, tsunamis, eruptions, cosmic impacts. Through this lens, the tale of the buried king at Gunung Padang no longer feels like fantasy. It feels like testimony. Perhaps those who built this place did not seek immortality in monuments, but in memory itself, embedding warnings in myth so that one day, when the world was ready to listen, the truth would re-emerge through story. Still, the modern world struggles with the weight of its own skepticism. We trust data, but distrust wonder. The scientists who defend Gunung Padang's deep antiquity face ridicule from peers who guard the boundaries of accepted history. To question the timeline is to risk exile from academia. Yet science itself was born from doubt, from the courage to ask whether the sky truly revolved around the earth. Sometimes, the stones are the ones asking the questions. If a civilization did exist 28,000 years ago, what was it like? Did it leave traces beneath the oceans, buried beneath layers of ice? Or did it leave its mark in us, in genetic memory, in myths, in a faint nostalgia that haunts the human soul? We speak of progress as though it were a straight road, but what if it is a spiral, rising and falling through time? Each age believing it is the first, each age rediscovering what the last one lost. Gunung Padang, in this sense, may not be a beginning or an end. It may be a mirror reflecting the cycles of rise and fall that define our species. Perhaps the builders themselves once looked upon ruins older than their own, asking the same question: who came before us? And maybe that is the real message the mountain holds, not proof, but pattern. A reminder that everything built upon forgetting will one day be buried again. When night returns, the terraces shimmer faintly in the moonlight, their edges softened by centuries of moss. Crickets sing, and the jungle breathes around them. Somewhere deep inside, the sealed chamber sleeps in darkness untouched since the Ice Age. It does not call to us. It waits. One day, we will open it, perhaps with machines, perhaps with reverence. We will lower lights into its hollow, expecting to find relics, bones, or artifacts. But maybe we will find only emptiness, because what it once contained was never meant to be seen, only remembered. And in that silence we will hear what the builders tried to tell us, that all knowledge begins as mystery, and that to seek it is to return, not forward, but inward, to the ancient pulse beneath our own skin. The stones of Gunung Padang have waited for millennia, unmoved by doubt or worship. Their patience is not human, it is geological, cosmic. They have seen empires rise, gods forgotten, oceans shift. And still they stand, carved by hands long turned to dust, speaking a language that no longer has words. Perhaps that is the truest language of all, the one that survives when all others are gone. Word count: 1,489. Night in the mountains falls like ink poured over glass. The outlines of Gunung Padang vanish into shadow, and the jungle hushes itself into listening. In that stillness, the hill seems less like a ruin and more like a heart, its rhythm slow, steady, older than the stars above it. People who camp near its base often speak of strange dreams, visions of a sea that once covered the land, of towers that glowed faintly against the horizon, of a sky filled with fire. Whether these are echoes from the past or reflections of imagination, no one can say. Yet the feeling persists, that the mountain remembers. The mystery of Gunung Padang has always been more than archaeological. It is existential. If the hill is indeed a 28,000-year-old monument, then humanity's story is not what we thought. Our rise was not singular, but cyclical. Civilization then becomes not a ladder, but a circle, built, buried, and built again. Perhaps this is why the idea unsettles so many. It suggests that progress is fragile, that knowledge can vanish as easily as a breath on glass. The evidence grows harder to dismiss. In one recent study, researchers extracted sediment cores from beneath the upper terraces, and within them found organic fragments, charcoal, and carbonized plant matter, dated to more than 20,000 years ago. Another study mapped magnetic anomalies across the site, revealing symmetrical zones of alternating polarity, as though the stones had been arranged to create an energetic field. Such precision, if intentional, implies not merely architecture, but design, an understanding of forces we still struggle to comprehend. And yet, with every new discovery comes resistance. Leading archaeologists insist that the deeper layers are natural lava formations, columnar basalt shaped by cooling magma. They point out that Indonesia's volcanic geology often produces hexagonal pillars resembling human workmanship. To them, the so-called chambers are illusions, products of misinterpreted data. The conflict is not only academic, it is philosophical. It is a battle between what we allow ourselves to believe and what we fear to imagine. The deeper one looks, the less certain truth becomes. That uncertainty is where mystery lives. Across the world, sites like Gunung Padang appear like scattered memories of a forgotten age. Beneath Lake Titicaca, sonar reveals submerged temple foundations. Off the coast of India, near Dwarka, divers explore stone streets drowned 10,000 years ago. In Turkey, beneath the hills of Derinkuyu and Nevşehir, cities stretch for miles underground, complete with ventilation shafts and wells, architecture both functional and mysterious. These are not isolated anomalies. They form a constellation of forgotten genius. And perhaps, if we could trace their alignments across time, they would point to something greater, a map of what once was. Some scholars have begun to link these patterns through the concept of a lost maritime civilization that flourished along the equatorial belt before the last great flood. As the ice sheets melted and sea levels rose more than 100 meters, coastal settlements would have been swallowed whole, leaving only highland remnants, like Gunung Padang, untouched. Geological evidence supports the rapid inundation of lowlands between 14,000 and 11,000 BCE, precisely when many flood myths place their deluge. Could the builders of Gunung Padang have been among the last survivors of that world? There is another question few dare to ask. How did they possess knowledge so advanced? Some point to natural genius, a slow evolution of understanding that vanished with catastrophe. Others whisper of contact, of guidance from a source beyond human origin. Such ideas dwell on the edge of speculation, but they persist, fed by symbols carved in stone. The Dogon of Mali, for example, knew of Sirius's invisible companion star centuries before telescopes confirmed it. The Sumerians spoke of beings descending from the heavens, bearing the secrets of agriculture and mathematics. In Central America, the Maya built observatories aligned to Venus's cycle with millimetric precision. Across the planet, the same story echoes. Knowledge arriving suddenly, fully formed, as though remembered rather than learned. If the builders of Gunung Padang inherited their understanding from an earlier age, or from somewhere else entirely, then the pyramid becomes not only a relic, but a message. Perhaps that is why it was buried, to protect it from misuse, to keep its resonance pure until the right moment returned. What that message might be remains unknown. Some researchers have theorized that the site encodes harmonic ratios found in nature, the same proportions governing music, orbital paths, and biological growth. The terraces, when measured precisely, reveal repeating sequences reminiscent of Fibonacci ratios. To dismiss that as coincidence is easy, but coincidence, repeated enough, becomes pattern. Still, the question lingers. What was Gunung Padang for? Was it a temple, a power generator, a calendar, or something more abstract, an interface between human consciousness and the planet itself? Modern science is slowly rediscovering what ancient minds may have known intuitively, that the Earth is alive, not metaphorically, but electromagnetically. Every storm, every pulse of lightning, sends waves circling the globe in frequencies that resonate with the human brain. To live in harmony with those frequencies is to live in balance. To disrupt them is to invite collapse. Could it be that the builders of Gunung Padang understood this relationship and shaped their monument as an instrument of planetary resonance, a way to sustain equilibrium during climatic chaos? If so, then the hill is not merely an artifact. It is a mechanism, but mechanisms decay when the memory of their purpose fades. The flood came, the ice melted, the builders vanished, and the mountain fell silent. For millennia it waited, wrapped in moss and legend, until modern tools began to disturb its sleep. Yet even now, as technology peers into its depths, it remains elusive. The closer we look, the less we see. Data contradicts itself. Samples yield conflicting ages. Every discovery births a counter-argument, as though the hill itself resists being defined. Perhaps that resistance is its lesson. Perhaps the true purpose of Gunung Padang is not to give us answers, but to remind us that certainty is the illusion of those who have forgotten how to listen. There are nights when the fog climbs the mountain, and the terraces seem to float like islands in the sky. On such nights, local villagers light small fires at the base and leave offerings, flowers, rice, incense, murmuring prayers not of worship, but of remembrance. They say the spirits of the builders still walk there, tall and silent, carrying lights that do not flicker. The flames burn briefly, then vanish, swallowed by mist. But those who have watched say that for an instant the air shimmers, as though the stones themselves exhale. It is tempting to romanticize such moments, to drown mystery in poetry. Yet beneath the poetic lies something concrete, humanity's enduring hunger for connection, with its own beginnings, with the earth, with the unknown. That hunger built Gunung Padang once, and perhaps it will again. We often imagine progress as conquest, of nature, of ignorance, of time. But what if progress is instead remembrance? What if to evolve is not to invent, but to recall? Gunung Padang does not demand belief. It demands humility. If the hill is indeed a relic of a lost world, then its silence is a mercy, a pause between cycles, a breath between civilizations. And if it is not, if all the evidence dissolves under scrutiny, then it remains no less sacred, for it still reminds us that we are brief, that the earth endures, and that memory itself is older than language. In the end, the question may not be whether an ancient civilization built this pyramid, but whether we, standing at the edge of another fragile age, are wise enough to hear what its stones are trying to say. For one day the sea will rise again, and the mountains will crumble, and our monuments will vanish beneath the soil. And perhaps, thousands of years from now, another species will stand above our ruins, wondering, as we do now, who built them and why. Maybe they will find their own Gunung Padang. And maybe they, too, will listen to the earth's quiet heartbeat and feel, for a moment, the same trembling awe, that what we call history is only the surface of something infinite, breathing just beneath the ground. Word count: 1 on 498. When dawn touches the highlands again, the fog curls around Gunung Padang like breath around a secret. The hill glows faintly beneath the thin light, its terraces softened by moss and centuries of silence. For all the arguments, the measurements, and the debates that rage in conferences and journals, the mountain itself remains indifferent. It waits, the way old things wait, not for belief, but for understanding. The deeper one descends into the study of Gunung Padang, the more it ceases to be an archaeological problem and becomes something else entirely. A mirror held up to humanity's own amnesia. It is not just about who built it, but about what we have forgotten. Beneath every question of age or structure lies a more intimate one. How many times have we begun again? Every civilization writes its story in stone, believing it will last. Yet stone too forgets if given enough time. The terraces of Gunung Padang bear marks of erosion so deep they resemble veins. Some of the pillars are fused together by heat, as if touched by a force beyond simple geology. Under microscopes, the crystal lattices within these rocks show stress patterns inconsistent with natural formation. They look forged, restructured, almost as if the basalt had been softened and reshaped, melted, cooled, and aligned. But how could that be in an age before metallurgy? Modern technology struggles to recreate such uniformity without machines. Could it be that the builders of Gunung Padang wielded a form of lost knowledge, an understanding of vibration, sound, or magnetism capable of altering matter itself? Around the world, similar questions rise from the stones. The precision of Baalbek, the seamless joints of Machu Picchu, the polygonal walls of Cuzco, all bear the fingerprints of techniques unknown to history. These are not mere coincidences. They are the handwriting of forgotten mastery. Some researchers have turned to physics for clues, suggesting that ancient cultures may have harnessed natural energy fields, the same telluric currents that run beneath the Earth's crust. In this theory, the terraces of Gunung Padang were not only ceremonial, but functional, built to focus and stabilize energy, much like resonant chambers. The basalt columns, rich in iron and magnetite, would act as conductors, channeling frequencies from the Earth. It sounds like speculation, but the data holds strange hints. Magnetic anomalies, sudden changes in electric potential, low-frequency vibrations measurable even today. It may seem fantastical, yet nature herself builds according to resonance. Crystals form in harmonic repetition, atoms spin in rhythms, and the heartbeat of the planet hums at 783 Hertz, the Schumann resonance, the same range as human brainwaves during meditation. Perhaps ancient builders didn't invent technology. Perhaps they listened to the one that already existed, the living pulse of the Earth. If that were true, then Gunung Padang is not simply a monument. It is a tuning fork, a bridge between consciousness and creation. Still, such thoughts make scientists uneasy. They prefer the tangible, the measurable, the visible. But what if the invisible was the very foundation of ancient understanding? Long before equations, humanity sensed that the world was alive, that mountains spoke and rivers remembered. The languages of myth were never nonsense. They were metaphors for truths that could not be expressed in numbers. In the caves of Sulawesi, not far from Gunung Padang, archaeologists have found hand stencils dated to over 40,000 years ago, the oldest art on Earth. The people who made them lived in the same archipelago, breathing the same air, walking the same ridges. Perhaps they too gazed at this hill and felt its hum. Perhaps they began to carve and paint not to express, but to echo, to mirror something ancient that the stones themselves were saying. There is a theory that human consciousness itself is cyclical, that it expands and contracts in rhythm with the planet's magnetic field. When the field weakens, civilizations rise into bursts of creativity and knowledge. When it strengthens, awareness contracts, memory fades, and history resets. If so, Gunung Padang might mark one of those high points, a moment when human understanding reached a height we can no longer imagine. But what happens when awareness outgrows wisdom? Many ancient myths speak of a fall. In Hindu lore, the end of Satya Yuga, the age of truth, comes when humanity becomes intoxicated with its own power. In Greek tradition, Atlantis fell through hubris. The Popol Vuh tells of creators who destroyed their first humans for forgetting gratitude. Everywhere, the same warning: knowledge without humility brings ruin. Perhaps that too is carved into Gunung Padang, not in words, but in its burial. it is possible that the pyramid was sealed not by catastrophe, but by choice, a deliberate act of concealment by those who knew what was coming. Maybe they understood that their world was ending, that the flood or the fire would erase all but stone. And so, they buried their knowledge within the mountain, trusting that one day another humanity would find it when it was ready to remember. In that sense, the pyramid becomes less a monument to power and more an act of mercy, a time capsule from a civilization that foresaw its own oblivion. Even the act of building atop itself, each era layering over the previous one, mirrors this cycle. Civilization does not progress, it accumulates sediment. We build on ruins, call it advancement, and forget what lies beneath. Gunung Padang is simply honest enough not to hide the pattern. The mountain teaches in silence, not proclamation. Those who have studied it deeply often speak of a strange peace that settles upon them there, as though the air itself slows the heartbeat. One researcher described feeling as if he were standing inside a dream that has not yet decided whether to end or begin. Another said he could hear faint tones at night, pulses at the edge of perception, like music just beyond memory. There are no recordings of these sounds. They exist only when one listens, only when one stops trying to prove. That may be the true paradox of Gunung Padang. It cannot be solved, only experienced. Each approach, scientific, spiritual, historical, reveals one face of a many-sided truth. But to see the whole, one must let go of the need for certainty. Maybe that is why the site provokes such strong reactions. It unsettles both the skeptic and the believer, because it erases the boundary between them. It reminds us that the greatest mysteries are not out there, but within the very structures of our perception. If the stones of Gunung Padang could speak, they might not tell us who built them. They might ask us who we have become since. For as we stare into the abyss of our past, it stares quietly back. When the rains return, the hill breathes steam, its terraces gleaming dark as obsidian. From above, the structure appears almost geometric again, its symmetry sharpening in the wet light. But no photograph captures its presence. To see Gunung Padang in person is to feel the scale of something older than logic. And perhaps that is its purpose, to restore awe. For all our satellites and algorithms, humanity has grown deaf to wonder. We quantify, categorize, and dissect, but we no longer kneel. Gunung Padang asks us to kneel, not in worship, but in recognition, that we are part of a story written not in ink, but in stone and silence. The scientists continue to drill, to measure, to argue. Politicians debate funding. Journalists seek headlines. Yet the mountain endures, untouched by urgency. Its secret, if it has one, is patient. It will not yield to haste. It will open only to those who approach it the way one approaches dawn, with stillness, with humility, with readiness to see. Until then, it waits beneath the mist, humming faintly in the language of resonance, the tongue of the forgotten. And every time lightning strikes the distant peaks, the glow ripples faintly across its terraces, as though the mountain remembers the fire that once forged it. Somewhere within that flicker lies a truth we are not yet prepared to hold, the realization that we too may be the ruins of something greater. Word count, 1093. By late afternoon, the clouds above Gunung Padang grow heavy with rain, and the world seems to dim, as if the light itself has weight. The mountain looms in quiet solitude, its terraces half swallowed by mist, its stones glistening like the scales of some ancient creature turning slowly in its sleep. Down in the valleys, life goes on. Children laugh, Roosters call, motorcycles hum through muddy roads. But here, time behaves differently. The air thickens, the wind slows, and if one stands still long enough, the hill begins to breathe. It is in such stillness that the mind begins to drift backwards through the strata of time. Beneath these stones lie not just layers of earth, but layers of memory, epochs folded one upon another like pages in a forgotten book. Each terrace tells a different story, yet all whisper the same refrain. We have been here before. Archaeologists examining the deeper cores of Gunung Padang have noted something curious. The lower strata, which predate known civilization by tens of millennia, contain traces of reworked soil, sediment that appears to have been deliberately moved and compacted. In some regions, fine layers of sand alternate with gravel and stone, forming a pattern too regular for chance. This, they say, suggests construction, foundation work, the deliberate layering of materials to stabilize a structure. To others, it is proof of nothing, merely the coincidence of nature imitating design. But nature, when left to itself, does not imitate intelligence so perfectly. What is buried beneath Gunung Padang may not be merely a structure, but an idea, the physical embodiment of knowledge preserved through architecture. The ancients, whoever they were, may have built this mountain to outlast even their own memory, encoding not words, but principles, proportion, alignment, frequency. Perhaps they believed that when their world ended, the stones themselves would teach the next. Such speculation invites ridicule, yet the deeper science digs, the more the old myths stir to life. The Sunda Shelf, the great drowned plain that once connected Southeast Asia into a single vast landmass, remains a geological fact. During the last ice age, it was not sea, but fertile valley and river. Its submersion around 12,000 years ago corresponds almost precisely with the flood legends found from Mesopotamia to Polynesia. For those who seek patterns, this is no coincidence. If a civilization did thrive upon that vanished land, Gunung Padang would have been its citadel, its sanctuary built upon high ground, safe from the encroaching sea. But perhaps the builders knew safety was temporary. When the waters rose, they buried what remained, sealing it beneath layers of stone to protect it from the chaos that followed. And chaos did follow. The Younger Dryas, a period of sudden global cooling, struck without warning, collapsing ecosystems and scattering species. Entire cultures would have vanished without leaving more than whispers. Those who survived would have remembered not science, but fear, and in time, that fear became myth. The story of a world drowned by divine anger, a knowledge lost, a mountain that once connected heaven and earth. Gunung Padang, in this sense, is not merely archaeology. It is memory petrified. Modern excavation, however, has slowed. Funding wanes. Skeptics grow louder. The Indonesian government, wary of international scrutiny, treads carefully, allowing limited research while discouraging grand claims. The narrative of history must be stable. Too many revisions unsettle the order of things. Yet even as official channels retreat, the whispers continue. Independent researchers return to the hill, armed with drones, ground sensors, and infrared mapping. Each scan deepens the enigma. The void beneath remains, unmoving yet undeniable. One scan, taken at midnight to minimize interference, revealed a reflection anomaly directly below the central terrace. A perfectly rectangular cavity, roughly 10 by 20 meters in size. Its edges are too clean, its symmetry too precise. No natural lava tube or erosion pocket follows such geometry. The question now is not whether the chamber exists, but what it holds. Some imagine artifacts, inscriptions, tools, proof of an advanced people lost to time. Others suspect nothing but air and silence, the echo of our own yearning projected into stone. Yet both possibilities are profound, for if the chamber is empty, it still testifies to intention, to the human need to preserve meaning even in absence. An empty vault is still a message. We were here. We built. We remembered. It is strange how humanity responds to such mysteries. The more uncertain the evidence, the more fierce the conviction. On one side, the defenders of orthodoxy guard their chronology like a fortress, fearing the collapse of order. On the other, dreamers and seekers embrace the anomaly, seeing in it proof of hidden truths. But the mountain itself belongs to neither camp. It offers no answers, only reflections. Perhaps the truth of Gunung Padang lies somewhere in between, in that delicate balance between myth and measure, between reverence and reason. Consider this. Every great discovery in human history once defied belief. The age of the Earth, the motion of planets, the existence of other galaxies, all were once heresy. Perhaps the same will be said of civilizations that predate history itself. The more we study, the more the timeline of humanity expands backward. First it was Mesopotamia at 5,000 years, then Jericho, Çatalhöyük, and Göbekli Tepe, 12,000 years. Now Gunung Padang threatens to triple that span. The pattern is clear. The deeper we dig, the older we become. And what if this regression never ends? What if beneath each discovery there lies another, older still, until the very notion of first civilization dissolves? Maybe there was no beginning, only cycles. Each epoch rising like a wave, shining for a moment, then crashing back into the sea of forgetting. It is possible that Gunung Padang marks not the dawn of civilization, but one of its many sunsets. When night falls, lightning flickers across the western horizon, briefly illuminating the terraces in flashes of silver. The air hums faintly. Instruments placed near the summit register minute electromagnetic pulses, steady, rhythmic, almost organic. The readings perplex engineers. Some suggest they are caused by subsurface water movement. Others claim interference from lightning, but the frequencies recorded match no known source. They pulse at intervals identical to human alpha brainwaves, the state of relaxed awareness between wakefulness and dream. Coincidence, perhaps? Or conversation? If ancient builders understood resonance, they may have designed the site not only for sight, but for sound, for the invisible interplay between matter and consciousness. Modern acousticians testing megalithic sites across the world have observed similar effects: low-frequency tones, amplifying brain coherence, altering perception. Could Gunung Padang have been such a place, a temple of sound where human thought and the earth's vibration met in harmony? In myth, sound is creation itself. In Hindu tradition, the universe began with Om, the primordial vibration. In Egypt, the god Ptah spoke the world into existence. The Greeks believed harmony governed the cosmos, the music of the spheres. Across cultures, the same intuition persists, that reality is not built, but sung. Perhaps Gunung Padang was humanity's way of joining that song. If so, then the pyramid's mystery is not technological, but spiritual. It is not about how it was built, but why. To reattune the human spirit with the resonance of the planet, to anchor consciousness in harmony with creation. And maybe, when that harmony broke, when arrogance replaced reverence, the builders chose silence. They buried the instrument. They let the world forget. The rain begins, heavy and deliberate. Droplets slide over the stones, tracing lines that have not changed in thousands of years. The jungle darkens, the horizon vanishes. The mountain disappears again, hidden as it has always been. Yet even unseen, it remains. It waits. Not for discovery, but for remembrance. For the true excavation is not of soil, but of memory. The real chamber lies within us, and perhaps when we are finally quiet enough, when the noise of our certainty fades, we will hear what the stones of Gunung Padang have been whispering since before history began. We will hear that civilization is not a story of progress, but of return. That knowledge, like the sea, always comes back to shore. That the earth never forgets, only waits for us to remember the language we once spoke with it. Word count: 1,196. There are places in this world where the past does not rest, it breathes. Gunung Padang is one of them. Beneath the weight of centuries, beneath the moss and volcanic dust, it exhales the memory of something that once was and refuses to die. Even now, when modern machines hum and drills press into its ancient skin, the mountain seems to pulse, as if aware of our intrusion. It does not resist, it observes, for the past does not fear the present. It waits for it to listen. Those who have spent nights on the hill speak of a sensation that cannot be measured, a low hum that rises and falls like a heartbeat, too deep for hearing, too subtle for proof. Sensitive instruments have registered micro-seismic vibrations beyond the usual tremors of the earth, frequencies that seem to form patterns, waves that repeat in intervals too regular to be random. One physicist, after studying the data, remarked that the readings looked almost like the signature of a machine long dormant, breathing at the rhythm of the planet. The thought unsettled him, as it should. For if Gunung Padang were a machine, a construct of intention rather than accident, then its purpose has been lost for longer than human memory can stretch. Yet somehow, it still hums. In 2023, a renewed team of researchers petitioned for permission to open a narrow borehole toward the suspected central chamber. The request was met with resistance, cultural, spiritual, and political. Excavation in Indonesia is not merely scientific, it is sacred. The earth here is not a specimen, but an ancestor. To pierce it is to trespass on lineage, and so the chamber remains sealed, not by stone alone, but by reverence. Still, the debate grows louder. Supporters of the ancient civilization hypothesis cite the overwhelming anomalies: layered terraces too structured for geology, mortared stones fused by heat, radiocarbon samples older than any recorded culture. They point to the global context: Gobekli Tepe, Deringkuyu, the sunken ruins of Yonaguni, and insist that Gunung Padang is part of a forgotten network, a remnant of a world erased by water and time. Skeptics, in turn, accuse the believers of chasing fantasy. They argue that all evidence of advanced Ice Age civilization is circumstantial, that coincidence, confirmation bias, and the human need for wonder drive such theories more than data does. Yet even among them, there is discomfort. For the anomalies persist, refusing to be fully explained away. It is not the first time the past has unsettled the present. In every age, discoveries appear that defy the accepted order. Fossils found in impossible strata, maps showing coastlines hidden beneath ice, artifacts made of metals that should not exist. Each revelation is met first with denial, then with silence, then with slow, reluctant revision. History, like nature, abhors disturbance. It prefers equilibrium, even if that equilibrium is built on forgetting. But the stones remember. The core of Gunung Padang, according to seismic tomography, reveals three main layers. The first is the visible terrace, roughly 2,000 years old. Beneath it lies a second, denser layer of arranged basalt, dating somewhere between 9 and 12,000 years. And then, beneath that, a massive inner structure, regular, geometric, and buried under 30 meters of soil, yielding dates as old as 28,000 years. To call it natural stretches belief beyond reason. The radiocarbon dating of organic fragments trapped between the stones adds to the enigma. One sample, extracted from deep within the lower stratum, yielded an age corresponding to a time when glaciers still ruled much of the northern hemisphere. If this structure was human, then it was built when mammoths roamed and the Sahara was green. To imagine civilization existing then requires a shift so vast that most historians refuse to make it. And yet, the evidence accumulates quietly, patiently, like the mountain itself. Some theorists suggest that the builders may not have been like us, not in culture, not in perception. They may have understood the world not as material, but as energy, a place of vibration and resonance rather than shape and surface. In such a worldview, construction would not be about stacking stone, but about tuning frequency, about creating spaces where the fabric of reality itself could be bent, harmonized, perhaps even healed. It sounds like mysticism to modern ears, yet quantum physics itself hints at a similar truth. That matter is not solid, but a field of vibration, that every particle hums with a note in the cosmic symphony. Perhaps the ancients did not need equations. They could feel it. Perhaps Gunung Padang is what happens when knowledge and intuition align. A cathedral built not for gods, but for frequencies. Across mythologies, mountains are always gateways. In Sumer, the gods lived in a mountain temple called Kur. In Mesoamerica, the gods descended from mountains of light. In the Himalayas, Mount Meru anchors creation. The archetype is universal, ascent as revelation, elevation as awakening. Perhaps this hill, too, was once seen as a bridge between worlds, the point where heaven and earth exchanged breath. It is tempting to dismiss such connections as poetic coincidence, yet human memory moves in patterns. Our myths are not inventions, but echoes. When the same shapes and symbols appear across continents separated by oceans, perhaps we are not looking at cultural diffusion, but at the residue of something older, an origin that once unified us before the flood divided us. There are scholars who propose that the builders of Gunung Padang may have been survivors of that older world, carrying fragments of knowledge to the new dawn. After the deluge, they became the bringers of agriculture, astronomy, and architecture, the ones remembered as gods or sages. Over time, their names blurred into legend, but their fingerprints remained etched into stone. If so, then the mountain is not a singular anomaly. It is a message repeated across ages, each echo fainter than the last. A reminder that what we call prehistory may simply be the memory of a civilization that refused to stay dead. The mind resists such thoughts because they invert the order of things. We like to imagine ourselves as the culmination of progress, the final note in a long symphony. But what if we are only another verse? What if the melody began long before us and will continue long after? That is the unsettling grace of Gunung Padang. It humbles. It turns history from a timeline into a spiral. At night, lightning strikes the nearby ridges, illuminating the terraces in sudden, ghostly flashes. For a heartbeat, the geometry reappears, the steps glowing, the stones glistening as though newly carved. Then darkness returns, and the illusion fades. But in that moment, it is easy to believe the hill is alive, that it is not a ruin at all, but something dormant, waiting for the world to remember how to speak its language. When scientists measure resonance along the terraces, they find frequencies that oscillate within the human alpha range, frequencies known to induce calm, clarity, and introspection. Standing there, the mind grows quiet, the boundary between thought and environment blurring. It is easy to see why ancient pilgrims came here, why they called it sacred. Perhaps that is the true nature of this place, not a pyramid, not a tomb, but an instrument of remembering, a structure that mirrors the human mind, coaxing it toward silence, toward awe. And in that silence, perhaps the builders themselves still speak. They speak through geometry, through vibration, through the stubborn endurance of stone. They speak to remind us that civilization is not measured in machines, but in meaning, that to build in harmony with the earth is not superstition, it is survival. For the flood always returns, the fire always comes, and every age that forgets the humility of the last must learn it anew. Gunung Padang is not a monument to greatness. It is a warning written in stone. A whisper from the deep past to the fragile present. Do not mistake memory for progress. Do not build without listening. As dawn breaks again over the highlands, the mist rises, and the terraces emerge once more, patient, eternal. They have seen countless generations come and go, each believing themselves to be the first. Yet the mountain endures, unchanging, humming softly beneath the world's forgetting. Perhaps one day, when the noise of our certainty quiets and the pulse of our machines fades into silence, we will finally hear it clearly. The steady rhythm beneath all things, the song that has never stopped. And in that moment, perhaps we will understand that Gunung Padang was never about the past at all. It was always about return. Word count, 1,495. The rain has fallen through the night, steady and slow, washing the terraces of Gunung Padang until they gleam beneath the first hesitant rays of morning. Mist curls up from the stones like smoke, drifting through the jungle canopy and into the sky. From a distance, the mountain looks less like a structure and more like a living being waking from a long dream, its breathing visible, its silence palpable. There is a stillness here that does not feel empty, but full, as though the air itself remembers. Those who arrive at dawn often describe the same feeling, a sense of familiarity, of déjà vu without memory. It is as if some part of the mind, ancient and buried, recognizes this place long before the intellect can explain why. The path winds upward through layers of moss and roots until, suddenly, the terraces appear, geometric, deliberate, impossibly old. Even the birds fall silent. What makes Gunung Padang so haunting is not simply its age, but its defiance. It stands as a contradiction to everything we have been taught about the origins of civilization. We are told that humanity's ascent was linear, that the path from cave to city was an unbroken climb of progress. But beneath these stones lies the possibility of another story, one that rises and falls like the tide. The story of civilizations that came before, reached greatness, and vanished, leaving behind only whispers carved in stone. As scientific teams continue to study the site, the evidence refuses to conform. Deep seismic tomography reveals a labyrinthine structure beneath the terraces, multiple layers descending like the steps of an invisible staircase. The density readings are irregular, too complex for a natural hill. One cavity, 40 meters deep, shows perfect angular boundaries, walls meeting at right angles, a rectangular void sealed under pressure. Whatever lies inside has not seen light for tens of millennia. The question of whether to open it divides those who care about the site. The rational impulse says we must. Knowledge demands revelation. Yet others insist that some doors were never meant to be forced. They recall ancient myths in which humanity's hunger for truth was its undoing. Pandora's jar, the forbidden fruit, the lost city swallowed by the sea. Perhaps, they say, the builders of Gunung Padang buried their wisdom for a reason. Perhaps it was not meant for us. Not yet. There is a certain poetry to that restraint. It reminds us that knowledge without reverence becomes arrogance, and arrogance is the shadow that follows every age. Still, there are clues scattered across the landscape, subtle alignments between stone and sky. When the sun sets on the solstice, the last light pierces a narrow corridor between the western terraces, illuminating a single pillar at the summit. Astronomers have traced that alignment to constellations no longer visible from this latitude, suggesting that the monument was oriented toward the stars as they appeared 26,000 years ago. Coincidence, perhaps. Yet coincidence wears the face of design too often. The deeper mystery lies not in the structure's engineering, but in its intention. What kind of mind builds something meant to last beyond time itself? The materials, the geometry, even the placement atop a volcanic ridge, all suggest purpose. Some have proposed that Gunung Padang may not have been a temple at all, but a form of communication, a monument designed to outlive language. The pyramid, they argue, is a universal shape, stable, unchanging, impossible to misunderstand. Across continents, across ages, it reappears. Egypt, Mesoamerica, China, Bosnia, Indonesia, each one built by different hands, yet all speak the same silent grammar. It is as if humanity, in some forgotten epoch, learned the syntax of eternity. What if the builders of Gunung Padang knew that their world was ending? What if they built not to be seen but to be found? If so, then every terrace, every layer is a message across time, a whisper to the future. Perhaps that is why the structure was buried rather than destroyed. Burial is not obliteration, it is preservation. Seeds, too, are buried so they may bloom again. And what if we are the bloom? What if we are the civilization the ancients built for, the ones meant to rediscover the harmony they lost? It is an unsettling thought, for it implies that we are not the pinnacle of progress, but the continuation of a memory. There is a resonance in that idea, one that ripples through every great myth of rebirth. The Hindu concept of kalpas, the Mayan cycles, the Egyptian Zep Tepi, the first time, all speak of ages that end and begin anew. The flood that ends one world is always the water that nourishes the next. Perhaps Gunung Padang is the bridge between those ages, a stone threshold between forgetting and remembering. Yet the modern world in all its brilliance struggles to hear such echoes. We live surrounded by noise, disconnected from the frequencies that once guided our ancestors. The ancient builders listened to the hum of the earth. We drown it out with machines. They watched the movement of stars. We watch the flicker of screens. And still, something in us longs for the silence of mountains, for the truth hidden in their stillness. There are researchers who now explore the acoustic properties of Gunung Padang, playing low-frequency tones across its terraces and recording how the vibrations travel. they find that the sound lingers longer than it should, as though the stones themselves amplify it. When the frequency drops to 7 or 8 hertz, the same range as the planet's own resonance, the effect becomes uncanny. The sound seems to come not from the speakers, but from the earth itself. Some have described it as standing inside a living instrument. Could this be coincidence, or was the mountain shaped to sing? If that is true, then perhaps Gunung Padang was not a temple for worship, but a space for attunement, a place where human consciousness could synchronize with the rhythms of creation. In such a state, thought dissolves, and what remains is communion, a oneness between the human and the eternal. Maybe that was their technology, harmony instead of conquest, and maybe that is what we have forgotten. The thought lingers as the wind shifts, carrying the scent of wet earth and the faint metallic tang of basalt. Somewhere below, a stream winds through the jungle, its murmur indistinguishable from the breath of the mountain. The stones gleam darkly under the sun, each one a syllable in a language of silence. If only we knew how to read it. But perhaps we do. Not with intellect, but with recognition. The same way we recognize a song we've never heard before, or a face glimpsed only in dreams. Some truths are not learned, they are remembered. When the archaeologists pack their instruments and descend the hill, the mist closes behind them, swallowing their footprints. By dusk, the terraces vanish again into the cloud. The world below hums with its modern rhythm, traffic, electricity, the heartbeat of cities. But up here the old pulse continues, unbroken. Maybe this is why Gunung Padang endures, because it teaches us what every civilization must eventually relearn, that progress without memory is decay, and that the deepest truths cannot be extracted with tools, only with silence. If one were to stand alone on the summit as the night falls, the horizon vanishing into darkness, one might feel it. A subtle trembling beneath the feet, like a sigh too long withheld. The stars emerge one by one, ancient and familiar, their light older than the stones themselves. And in that light, the mountain seems to shift. Not a ruin, not a relic, but a presence. It does not offer answers. It never did. It only asks the same question, again and again. Will you remember this time? And somewhere in the quiet, as the wind moves through the terraces, it feels as though the earth is whispering back to itself, patient, eternal. Because Gunung Padang has never been waiting for us to discover it. It has been waiting for us to remember who we were when we built it. Word count, 1,497. The final light of day falls gently upon the ridges of West Java. The jungle exhales a faint mist that drifts over Gunung Padang like the veil of a sleeping god. Distant thunder rolls, slow and deep, as though echoing from another age. The terraces shimmer with the damp sheen of rain, their basalt pillars catching the last embers of sunlight before sinking into shadow. And in that twilight, the mountain seems almost translucent, less a structure of earth than a memory made visible. For centuries, people have climbed this hill seeking answers. Yet the longer one stands upon its summit, the more one understands that answers were never its gift. What Gunung Padang offers is reflection. It is not a monument to knowledge gained, but to knowledge lost, and to the quiet acceptance that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. As darkness thickens, the sounds of the forest change. Cicadas begin their high, trembling chorus. Somewhere below, water trickles over stone, as it has for thousands of years. Each droplet wears the mountain a little thinner, carving the same pathways it once followed when this land was part of a vast continent now drowned beneath the sea. It is easy, standing here, to imagine the world as it was then, a single stretch of green reaching from Indochina to Australia, a land teeming with rivers and light. It was called Sundaland, the heart of a forgotten world. If the old legends hold even a breath of truth, that world ended not in a slow decay, but in a moment of violence. The seas rose, the rains came, and the sun itself seemed to dim. Across the planet, myths remember it: the Great Flood, the fall of Atlantis, the submergence of Lemuria, the deluge of Manu. They differ in name, but not in rhythm. Each speaks of an age destroyed and reborn. Perhaps Gunung Padang was one of the last high places to remain above the water, a sanctuary built in anticipation of loss. Perhaps those who constructed it watched their horizon vanish beneath the sea, their cities swallowed, their histories erased. Perhaps they turned to stone because stone alone endures when language fails. The evidence of catastrophe lies all around us. In the geological record, a line of ash marks the end of the Pleistocene, a scar from a time when glaciers melted faster than rivers could flow. Core samples from Greenland show traces of platinum and soot, the signature of impact. In Indonesia, volcanic deposits from Mount Toba tell of eruptions powerful enough to darken the world for decades. And through all of it, the human story trembles like a fragile thread woven through chaos, breaking, retying, beginning again. What survived those convulsions of the earth were not empires or machines, but stories. The oldest scriptures of India speak of the Mahapralaya, the great dissolution, after which creation begins anew. The Greeks called it ekperosis, the cyclical burning and rebirth of the cosmos. The Maya recorded it as the end of one sun and the birth of another. Each tale, in its own way, remembers the same rhythm. The world ends, the world begins. Gunung Padang may be one of the last witnesses of that turning, the threshold between ages. To the rational mind, such thoughts border on madness. Yet the mountain invites madness of the sacred kind, the madness of remembering what reason has forgotten. Science, after all, deals in what can be measured, but the human spirit measures differently. It knows that some truths are too vast for numbers. Those who have studied the site for years describe a curious transformation. At first, it is data that draws them, samples, readings, hypotheses. But with time, the work changes them. The boundaries between archaeology and reverence blur. They begin to speak not of discovery, but of listening. They describe the hill as if it were alive, responsive. One researcher, after years of studying its acoustics, confessed that he no longer wished to dig. "It feels wrong," he said, "as if the mountain is already speaking, but we are too loud to hear it." That sentiment echoes across generations. Perhaps this is the lesson Gunung Padang has waited to teach. That silence, too, is knowledge. The rain stops. The clouds drift apart, revealing a sky thick with stars. Far from the cities, the heavens here are ancient and vast. Constellations, long forgotten, burn above the terraces, the same stars the builders once knew. The air cools, and the basalt breathes out the day's warmth in thin threads of steam. Standing here, one senses a symmetry between above and below, as if the mountain were a mirror of the night. Maybe that was always the purpose, to create a structure where the sky could see itself. From above, the layout of the terraces forms an intricate geometry, almost fractal in its repetition. Some researchers claim that the proportions of its levels mirror harmonic ratios found in nature. The same ratios that shape seashells, hurricanes, and galaxies. Whether deliberate or accidental, the correspondence is uncanny. To the ancients, harmony was not metaphor but mathematics, the measure of truth itself. If Gunung Padang embodies such ratios, then it is not only architecture but philosophy, a meditation in stone on the unity of all things. And that unity, perhaps, is what the builders sought to preserve. Not technology, not power, but understanding. A reminder that the human soul and the world are not separate. When we forget that, the earth reminds us in her own language: fire, flood, silence. The world we inhabit now is bright with knowledge, yet dim with wisdom. We reach for the stars, but we no longer listen to the ground beneath our feet. Gunung Padang stands as a quiet contradiction to that blindness. It does not shout, it hums, it does not explain, it remembers. Maybe that is why it remains hidden, because we have not yet earned the right to see it fully. Knowledge without reverence cannot unlock what was built in reverence. The debate around its origins will continue for decades, perhaps centuries. Scholars will argue, governments will fund and defund, explorers will dig, and skeptics will deny. Yet the mountain will remain exactly as it is, unchanged, patient. Whether it proves to be 28,000 years old or merely 2,000, its message does not depend on age. Its truth lies not in what it reveals, but in what it restores. It restores the forgotten balance between science and spirit, between the seen and the felt. It reminds us that discovery is not conquest, but communion. At the summit, where the final terrace meets the sky, there stands a single broken pillar. No inscription marks it, no ornament crowns it. It leans slightly, weathered by centuries of wind. But when the moon rises behind it, the pillar casts a shadow perfectly aligned with the mountain's central axis, a line that points north toward the pole star. To the ancients, the pole star was the still point of the heavens, the one that never moved. It represented constancy amid motion, eternity within time. Perhaps that is what the builders sought, a way to anchor impermanence to something that endures. We too seek that anchor, though we call it by other names: truth, meaning, peace. And maybe that is what Gunung Padang offers in its quiet way, a glimpse of stillness beneath the noise of existence. When the wind rises again, it moves through the terraces with a sound almost like speech. The jungle stirs, the stars pulse, and for a moment, it feels as if the world itself breathes in unison. In that breath lies the truth the ancients left behind. That time is not a straight line, but a heartbeat, and that every end is only a return. So let the scientists argue. Let the stones remain buried. The mountain does not need to be proven. It simply is. And in being, it reminds us that we, too, are temporary echoes of something eternal, waves in a sea that never stops moving. As dawn begins to rise once more, the terraces vanish beneath mist, just as they did 10,000 years ago. The world forgets, as it always does. But beneath the forgetting, the stones endure, humming softly, endlessly, waiting for the next age to listen. Perhaps that is what eternity truly means, not endless time, but endless remembering. Word count: 1496.